Good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. First of all, I want to let you know that this webinar is recorded, so we'll share the recording with you afterwards. And then second of all, in the chat section there, you can actually type messages and so forth. So if you have any questions during the webinar, please send me a message there and I'll do my best to address them. With that, I want to say thank you for being here today. This webinar is intended to be an introduction to Priority Matrix. So what we'll be covering will be the basics of Priority Matrix. Hopefully, you're here today because you're interested in learning how to be more effective at prioritizing tasks and emails, and then also leveraging a platform like Priority Matrix to ensure that your team members are working on the right things. And my name is Hai. I am co-founder of Affluence, which is the company behind Priority Matrix. Over the years, I've talked to thousands of customers, and I've seen every possible use case of Priority Matrix. So with that, I want to make sure that you can leverage my experience in terms of using Priority Matrix. And so if you do have questions, please send them in the chat. Okay. So now we'll start the presentation. My goals for today to help you understand the basics of Priority Matrix and then provide you a framework to get the most out of Priority Matrix with the least work. That's always my goal, because I think that every piece of software has a lot of nuances and so forth, but we always follow the 80-20 rule, which is what are the 20% of the features in Priority Matrix that'll give you 80% of the value. And hopefully when you walk away from today's webinar, you'll feel that way. And then lastly, help you envision what work and life success may look like with Priority Matrix to prioritize your tasks and emails. Let's start with the challenges. There's 3 challenges that I want to highlight. The first is that team members always have trouble understanding what's priority right now. And so what's really fascinating is that, as an individual, of course, we're struggling with prioritization, but at the team level, it's even harder, because if you don't know what you need to focus on, how can others know? And so a lot of customers, a lot of people in general struggle with this team prioritization. And then the second problem is that it's really difficult to keep track on the status of work across many areas of responsibilities. Now, when I say areas of responsibilities, what I mean here is that it's either projects or initiatives or just goals that we have in general. And more so than ever before, we are no longer responsible for one thing. Every single one of us responsible for so many things, right? You just get thrown more work at you and more projects and so forth. And so it builds up over time. And so it's really, really difficult to understand, what should I work on today within the bigger picture? And then lastly, I feel that over the last couple of years, emails and meetings and all these other software that's been put in place by our organizations just cause far too much context switching. For myself, for example, every single day I'm switching between emails and messages inside Teams and Priority Matrix and so forth. So it's a real problem that all of us face, and the vast majority of people face them. So Priority Matrix is intended to tackle some of these challenges, and we do it through several ways. But first, Priority Matrix is a comprehensive email, priority, and project management software to help teams manage emails, conduct efficient meetings, and get real-time status updates on critical projects and priorities. Now, what I want to highlight is that Priority Matrix, at the end of the day, is a communication tool. And when I say communication tool, what I mean by that is, what it does is it helps you understand what needs to be worked on within the right context. And so hopefully, as you look at Priority Matrix, you think of how to apply it to your everyday needs. And so we also emphasize the word priority management more so than project management. And when we think about priorities, it's not just about the things we have to do, it's the things we should do when we have limited resources. So how does Priority Matrix help? First, we use what's called the 4-quadrant methodology to promote effective prioritization. And I'll go into the details, the philosophy behind the 4-quadrant methodology if you're not yet familiar with it. And then second, Priority Matrix provide the views such as the one-on-one agenda timeline to help you understand what needs to be done within the right context. And context is all around what are the things that is important for you at any point in time, right? The dimensions of context could be, what are the things I need to do today? Or what are the things I need to do for my manager? Or what are the things I need to do for a certain client or initiative? And then lastly, Priority Matrix provide really deep integrations into systems you already use. In particular, we're probably the most integrated solution inside Microsoft Teams and Outlook. So if you use Microsoft Teams and Outlook, it's almost a no-brainer to integrate Priority Matrix into those systems. But of course, Priority Matrix works outside of that too. What makes Matrix better than a lot of other software out there? I am sure that if you're here today, you've been looking for a way to prioritize your task and projects and emails many times before, and you've seen 1,000 solutions. Even Microsoft itself has hundreds of applications, I feel, that actually solve the same problem. But there's a couple things that makes Matrix unique. First of all, we are a Microsoft 365 security certified solution, and the only one that's certified in our Teams app, Outlook app, and web app. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is the leveraging of AI for you to actually create goals. And from those goals, help you figure out the tasks to achieve them. And we're at very early stages there, but I'm still going to show you because I think it's actually pretty interesting. And then we provide what I call people-centric collaboration. I think a lot of software focus on projects, right? You have a project, you have all the tasks in it. Matrix flips all of that around and show you what are the things you need to do for a coworker or with your manager, etc. And then lastly, Matrix is available as a SaaS, which is a standard software application, a HIPAA compliant solution for healthcare and life sciences, and then an Azure government cloud for state and local government. So the vast majority of you will use their standard SaaS, but if you do have any questions around the enterprise aspect of Matrix, please feel free to reach out to us. Or if you're on the IT side looking for approving these applications, feel free to reach out to us. So what makes Matrix particularly effective is that it helps you understand what needs to be done right now, what needs to be done later, and then what are the things you should delegate. At the end of the day, Matrix provide one place where everyone can go to understand what needs to be done. And so when I say one place, what I mean is if you and your coworkers are trying to understand, hey, what are the things we can do that's most effective towards achieving our goals or whatever it is that we're trying to do this year, this quarter, this month, Party Matrix provides that central place where it's easy to see what everyone's priorities are. So let's talk about the fundamental behind Party Matrix. And in some ways, what inspired all of this is a quote from former President Eisenhower, attributed to former President Eisenhower: "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." What I really like about this quote is it captures the dimensions of the things we have to do so well. When you have a list of things to do, where do you start, top or bottom, right? But instead, if you can actually terse them out and look at all these things you have to do from the perspective of which of these tasks are important, and then which of these tasks are urgent, and then if you combine the two dimensions, what are the things that are important and urgent? What are the things that are important and not urgent? And what are the things that are not important but urgent? And so if you look at all the things you have to do, I am sure that you're going to find that all your tasks sort of fit into these various buckets. And so instead of actually looking at everything from a linear perspective, we look at it from a dimensional perspective. And so what Matrix does is it takes all these tasks that you have to do and it puts it into these buckets. It's as simple as that. The buckets that are due now, that's important and urgent. The buckets that are important and not urgent, that's the plan bucket. And then the things that are not important but urgent, perhaps you could delegate to somebody else, right? And then lastly, you should never write down anything that's not important and not urgent. So instead, we have the inbox, which is, you can think of a place, a repository, to capture your thoughts, your ideas, or tasks that you don't know where they belong yet. That's it. That's the essence of Party Matrix. What it's doing is it just taking all these very simple, a very simple concept, applying a software form, and help you take the tasks that you have and put it into a way that's more visual and more easily understood. And so the way that one of the exercises I love to ask, customers to do, and you yourself included here, is imagine taking everything you have to do right now, write it down, right? It could be a list to start. And then from that list, split it into this matrix as I presented here, and then walk around the office to compare notes. And that's where the magic happens with Party Matrix. So the 4-quadrant Eisenhower Matrix creates alignment because it forces you to prioritize from the beginning. You can't put it in a linear list, right? When you do put that linear list, it's hard for you to decide what to work on. So success when using Party Matrix isn't necessarily about finding what everyone agrees on. So if you walk around the office and everyone is on the same page with you, everyone says, "Oh, you've got all the priorities exactly right," and then you look at others' priorities and they're all exactly right, then you're great. I mean, you don't have to worry about using any software system. Honestly, you can just execute. But where Party Matrix is helpful is when you find and discover the disagreement. right? Which is something that you think is a priority, but your manager doesn't, or vice versa. And so that's what I would say is the power of Priority Matrix, which is it's so simple at the end of the day, but it's about discovering and surfacing up all those disagreements and priorities, and then helping ensure that when you work on something, it is the right thing. So with that, I'm going to jump into the presentation of the software to walk you through how to use the product, how to leverage the features. But I do want to mention again that the webinars are recorded and they're posted on our website, affluence.com/webinars. There's 2 other webinars that I did recently, which is an email management masterclass, which goes really deep dive into how to prioritize your email, how to forward them into Priority Matrix, how to delegate emails. And then the second is in templates, which is how to actually create automated workflow in Priority Matrix. So I do want to mention those 2. If you're interested, you can go ahead and watch those. But other than that, if you do have questions during the rest of this presentation, send them in the chat and I'll try to address them. And now I'm going to jump into the product. So here I have Priority Matrix open. So this is the web app version of Priority Matrix. It's very, very straightforward, but I want you to see how front and center is the 4 quadrants. And that's the whole thing around Priority Matrix, which is instead of a linear list, when you open Priority Matrix, you select what's called a project. And so on the left-hand side here is the list of my projects. And so you can see in this demo account, I have 30 or 40 projects here. In my actual real work account, I have something like several hundred projects. But the beauty of Priority Matrix is that it works at a project level in the sense that every project has a quadrant. And so when you create a Priority Matrix project, this is your starting point, right? So my recommendation always, when you start Priority Matrix, the very first thing you do is go ahead and create a project called My Personal Priorities. So the way you create a project is the following. You click on the quadrant here at the very top. Oh, actually, I have my presentation here in Microsoft Teams, but our web app is actually very similar. So I'll jump over the web app here. So in the web app, I have my list of project here. I click on this. I click Show All Projects. I choose Add Project. I can choose a blank project, and then I type My Personal Priorities. So that's one of my recommendations for you to start when you use Priority Matrix the very first time. And so since I already have that project created, I'll go ahead and open My Personal Priorities here. Now, when you have My Personal Priorities project selected, you can click on this top icon here called Edit Project, and it opens what's called the project details. So what the project details is, it's essentially the name of the project. I can star the project, which is a way for me to actually push the project to the very top of the list. And then I can decide who are the members, who are the people that I want to be able to view this project. So obviously, maybe your personal priority is just you, but if you had a team project, you might invite your coworkers or your managers or your direct reports. And then below that, you actually have the quadrants themselves. So as I mentioned, the terminology that we have was do now, do later, delegate, and inbox. But with Priority Matrix, you can actually customize these quadrant names as needed. So I can literally click on this and change, instead of saying do now, sometimes people call it fires. And because the reality is the stuff that are important and urgent are just like fires that you have to fight, right? And then instead of the plan, I have do later, and so on. So you can actually customize each of these. And the reason we let you do that customization is because everyone's brain sort of works in a different way. And in fact, every organization works in a different way in terms of the terminology and so forth. So we've seen some best practices where some organizations will have a guide on naming the quadrants. And it's a good idea, especially if you want to create an alignment in terminology with the rest of your organization or the rest of your team. And then with that, you can also change the color of every quadrant. So you can click on this and change the quadrant color. And what I like about the quadrant color is that you see how it's very visual on the left-hand side here, right? So you might have marketing projects as certain color, or engineering projects, or various clients or initiatives and so forth. So use the color coding as just a way to help you see the things that you have to work on. Okay, so now we have the quadrants. How do you create a task? That's the first and foremost, most important thing in Priority Matrix. So when you use Priority Matrix, you can add a task by hovering over any quadrant, and then you see that add item pops up. So let me go ahead and create a task in my inbox here. I'm going to say follow up with webinar participants. Okay, so I can type that as a task name, and then I can say due tomorrow 2 p.m. Okay, so go ahead and do that. I'll go and click add. So what happens is I've just added a task in Party Matrix. One of the things that happens now is on the right-hand side, the item details opens up. So the item details tells me information around this task. So for example, this is the task name. This is the project it belongs in. I can also star this task. And so what starring does is, again, it pushes to the top of the quadrants, right? So you can think of it as another dimension within the matrix in order to prioritize tasks. And then you can add icons. So since, I likely will be emailing you, I will do that email icon. And you see that email icon when added shows up here on my list. And so it's another visual for me to see the type of task they belong in. And then the owner. So obviously, since it's a personal project, maybe I'm the only person on this task. But if it was a team project, I could assign this to a coworker. So let me go ahead and assign it to a coworker. So now this person is responsible for the task. I'm a follower, which means when this task gets updated, I'll get notified. And then next to that, I have progress, effort, reminder, and dates. So dates, you see how it actually interpreted the due date for me from the due tomorrow at 2 p.m. and actually set the due date for me here. But there's a difference between dates and reminder that I really want to emphasize. Imagine if you have something that's due in 2 weeks, right? But it'll take you 3 days to get it done. If you set a due date in 2 weeks and then that due date comes, you're not going to have the time to get that done. So what reminder does is reminders surfaces that back up for you at a time that you request. So let me give an example. Let's say here I have due tomorrow at 2 p.m., but at the very bottom here, I'm going to type remind me in 3 hours, right? And so what happens now is Party Matrix will send me a reminder in 3 hours to start working on this task. It is so important to use due dates and reminders. So going back to the 80-20 rule, due dates and reminders are definitely the top features that you should be using inside Party Matrix. Everything that you create should have a due date and reminders, in my opinion. When I create tasks, I always set that. The reason being is that if you think about the various dimensions of the task you have to do, again, you have importance versus not important, and then you have urgent versus not urgent. If you don't have time set, how would you get to them, right? Then they're just going to be in the back of your in the matrix, but without actually surfacing up. So I love setting reminders and due dates for that reason. The second being, this is how we overcome the problem of tackling urgent tasks. Let me give you an example. When you started your day this morning and you look at your email, right? The last email in is the top of the list, right? So when you open that email, you look at it and you're like, okay, do I need to respond to this and so forth? But that email may not have been the most important of all the emails that you receive overnight or over the previous day. And so we tend to be pulled into these urgent things without ever being able to spend time on identifying whether or not they're important. So the way reminders works, in my opinion, is that it helps surface up tasks to the top of the list. So then you can actually ensure that you get them done. So when you imagine if you have that email, let me give you the same example as email. Imagine if whenever you use your emails, the most important emails that you never got to keeps on pinging and actually surfacing to the top of the list, then you always get to it, right? You're never going to drop that. And so the same thing works in Party Matrix. So that's why I love setting due dates and reminders on everything that's important, because it will surface back up for me on a constant basis and ensure that I get to it. And so the second thing is I can also set what's called recurring reminders. So for example, if I need to follow up with somebody, I would set a due date in like 2 months, and then I'll set a weekly reminder. And the way I do that in Party Matrix is I just say, remind me weekly. And now on a weekly basis, this task will actually jump to the top of my alert section and remind me to actually get to it. And so you can see that I can actually click on these buttons and set the reminders, click on this button and set the due date. But at the same time, Party Matrix use a lot of natural language. And so down here in the chat section, you can type a bunch of other things too. You can say, due in 2 weeks, for example, and Party Matrix will automatically interpret that for you. Whenever you see a green text here, it means Party Matrix is interpreting that as an actual command. So now that we talk about the dates, I scroll down a little bit further, there's a chat section. And so obviously I've been modifying the chat as we're talking here, but you can look at the chat section to serve at least 2 purposes. The first is a way to communicate with your coworkers who's in this task. So for example, let's say Eugenia is on this task as I assigned to her. When she opened this task, she'll see the same chat as I do here. And imagine if I actually add information, I would say, hey, could you follow up with these people at these dates and so forth? That information is here, and she can look at it and get the full context and understanding of what it is that she needs to do. And then as she makes progress updates and respond to the task, this chat section gets updated and I get that same update whenever I look at the task. The reason this is helpful is because, unlike, let's just say you use Microsoft Teams or something like that, and if you're chatting with a coworker and you're talking about 10 different things, there's no history of it within the right context, right? In 3 months, when you try to understand what are the things we talked about for task X or project Y, there's no record because it was talked about in a Teams conversation, or it was talked about in a meeting, or it was talked about in the hallway. And so the whole point of the chat section in Pretty Matrix is to have that communication in one central place. The second purpose is that it provides a full record, an audit trail of all the changes. And then what's really nice is that when you have a new person who's taking over a task that's old, they can look at the history and see all the changes that's ever been made. And so Pretty Matrix gives you that record, and you can actually save this and print it. So if you're in a regulated industry or you need to do really good record keeping, Pretty Matrix keeps those records for you. The next that's the notes section. So the notes section is where you can add details around the task itself. It is not intended to be rich text. I want to clarify that. If you want rich text with headers and so forth, use Microsoft Word, use Google Docs, and you can attach it to Pretty Matrix in the resources section instead. Whereas the notes section in Pretty Matrix is just a place for you to add some plain text information. You can also add bullet lists and also subtask. So the way you add subtasks is you just click on this and you can say subtask 1, subtask 2, and subtask 3, right? And so now that you have multiple subtasks added, as you mark each subtask as done, the progress will update. So that's just what the notes section is for. It's to add additional information so then your coworkers can actually look at it and understand what are the other things you have to do for it. The other thing about the notes section and using subtasks is that when you create those subtasks, it creates a record here for you too. So if you want to make a note around status update or something like that, hey, we did XYZ and so forth for this particular task, and you want a timestamp of it, simply create a subtask, and that information will pop up right here as part of the record. And then lastly, you have the resources section. So the resources section is where you can attach files, documents, links into Pretty Matrix. Not only that, Pretty Matrix allows you to attach emails as well as other Pretty Matrix tasks, as well as Microsoft Teams conversation. So the resources section is very powerful if used correctly, and it depends on what it is that you need it for. So I, for example, love to prioritize my emails. And so when I get an email, I'll prioritize the email. And when I do, it shows up here in the resource section, and I can actually send that email over using my phone, using my computer. I can be anywhere, and I still have it all in one central place in Pretty Matrix. And so the resources section keep that in one central area. The neat thing about the resource section too is that if you prioritize an email and then you delegate it to a coworker, they can also access that email and open it and respond to it. So if you have an email and you need your assistant to go and respond to it, that's what you do. You prioritize the email, and then that'll show up right here. So that's what the resource section is for. But as you can see with Pretty Matrix, you can upload files. You can link existing items. So for example, if I click link existing item, I can choose another task in Pretty Matrix. And then not only that, I can say that, these tasks are blocked by or blocks or caused by or caused. So if you need to ever create dependencies, that's how you do it inside Pretty Matrix. And of course, you can attach URL as well. Okay, so that's how you edit tasks, and that's how you create a task. And so I do want to talk about what are the features within here that I think is most important. Again, due date, reminders, and ownership, right? If you do those three things with the task, it's actually sufficient to get a lot of value out of Pretty Matrix. Going back to the quadrant view here, one thing you can do is you saw how I added this task in quadrant 4, but now if I want to reprioritize it, I just drag it. So I just drag and drop inside Party Matrix. And so when you have your massive list of tasks, you can actually put them in the appropriate place. And it's very, very visual. It's very easy to see what are the things that are important and urgent, what are the things that are important and not urgent. And then not only that, I can actually resize the quadrant here. So then when I start my day, I can focus just on the bucket that matters most. So within each project, there's a couple of other things you can do. While the quadrant is the primary way of viewing the data, you can actually switch over to what's called list view. So what the list view does is it takes everything that you have to do and put it in a list, obviously. One thing that I like about the list view is it's very easy to see the tasks that are overdue. So let me go ahead and switch to another project here. So you see how I'm still in the list view, but when I switch to another project here, I can see the tasks that are overdue and they're red. And so it's very visual and very easy for me to capture those. I can click on each task and I can change the due date or redelegate as needed. Of course, I can sort by quadrants, sort by icons, sort by owner, and so on. Next to that view is the calendar view. What the calendar view does is, of course, tasks that have due dates will show up on here, and you can still click on each of these and edit the item detail as needed. But not only that, you can drag and drop them to change the due date very easily. So if I need to manipulate a bunch of tasks with due date, this is the easiest way to do it. And then next to that is the Gantt chart view. So the Gantt chart view takes all the tasks that you have again and put in a timeline view. Now, this is very good if you have tasks that spans across months, because the whole point of the Gantt chart is for you to see the timeline across a much longer horizon than just a calendar. And then, of course, if you create dependencies such as cause by or block by, then those dependencies will show up here inside the Party Matrix Gantt chart. Now, one thing you'll notice is there's a lot of buttons and other things that I didn't show, and I'm not going to show them because you don't need them to get the most out of Party Matrix as a new user. And now, as you use Party Matrix more and more, you'll want to go and explore these other capabilities because there's a lot more to it, but it's intended to cover every aspect of project management and every aspect of team collaboration. But from a personal standpoint, if you just create the task and put it into the matrix here and prioritize them into the appropriate places, that's where you get the most value. As I mentioned, Party Matrix is a communication tool, right? And so when you use Party Matrix and you go and you have a meeting with your team, and then you need to talk about team priorities, guess what? Just plug your computer in and project Party Matrix on the big screen. Everyone can take a look at it and they'll see exactly what the team priorities are. They can talk about it. And then the most important thing is that they can focus on quadrant one. One of the things I hate to see all the time is that people will get into a meeting, they'll talk about a bunch of different stuff, and then the meeting is over, and then they realize they never got to the important task. Why? Because they're using a linear agenda, right? You have a linear agenda. You're going from the top to the bottom. You're not looking from the perspective of importancy. And so when you use Party Matrix, what happens is when you bring up that team priority list, you can see exactly what are the things that we should talk about first, which is the quadrant one, and then the things that are in quadrant two. Hopefully that makes sense. That is a best practice that I've seen, people have a lot of success with. So let's talk a little bit more about creating projects. Now that you've seen what it's like to have a personal priorities project and a team priority project. So when you click on this project here, again, you go show all project, you can click add project, and you have several options. I showed you earlier when you create a blank project, you can go and just type the project name, and then you can choose some of the basic templates. And all this is it's just changing the quadrant names. As I mentioned, do now, do later, and the Eisenhower method is just one way of naming the quadrants. There's 1,000 other ways, literally 1,000 other ways. And so we let you have some of these other options available from here in a blank project, and of course you can choose the color as the starting point. The other thing you can do though is you can actually create a project from what's called public templates. So it's the same thing as some of the other templates that we have, but some of these public templates actually provide a little bit more details on the use case for that, as well as some of them actually have tasks pre-populated as well. One thing with Party Matrix that's really powerful is the ability to create templates. Let me give you an example. Let's just say if you have a workflow that repeats all the time, right? And so maybe that workflow is around client onboarding process or something like that, where you have these 10 things you have to do for a client whenever you bring on a new client. So with Protomatrix, you can create a project inside Protomatrix. Within those 4 quadrants, you create those tasks and all those due dates. Then what you can do is you can save it as a template. And then when you do that, you have this option here to create a project from an existing template instead. So for example, I can choose a client onboarding project, and then I can just say that I'm going to onboard this client on January 1st, and I click use template. And you see how it created a Protomatrix for me, but instead of having a blank project, it actually copies all the tasks that I have and actually set all the due dates for me. So this is extremely powerful way of saving you a lot of time and resources if you have repeated tasks. So again, one of the webinars I have covers this much more deeply, showing you how to edit it, how to modify it, how to save it as Excel documents, etc. So if you're interested to learn more about that, make sure you check out our other webinar. Okay, so that's how you create projects. So I've covered creating projects, I've covered using the quadrants and customizing them, and I've covered how to create tasks and delegating them. So now let's switch gear a little bit and talk about email management. That's probably the #1 reason customer comes to Protomatrix, because everyone is struggling with emails. And so if you struggle with emails, you're not the only one. And even myself, I struggle with emails. I get hundreds of emails per day. It's very, very difficult to stay on top of them. And so when you get a bunch of important emails, what do? You flag them, right? And of course, I'm guilty of that too. I flag them. It's fine if I have 5 flagged emails, but if I have dozens of flagged emails, it is very, very difficult to actually stay on top of that. So with Protomatrix, what I can do is instead of just flagging the emails, I can convert them into task. So for example, here I have my Outlook open and I have an email selected. Now, if you have Outlook, you simply go to the apps list here, click add apps and choose Protomatrix. And then when you do that, just sign in with your same Protomatrix account. I already have it installed, of course, so I'm going to choose Protomatrix here, and I have 2 options. I can prioritize the email or open Protomatrix. So I'm going to choose prioritize email. Now, the right-hand side opens up, and it allows me to convert this email into a task. And you see this capture email as task. And now you see how I can actually choose, I can change the item name, right? It inherits the subject of the email first, and then I can choose what project it goes in, and I can choose what quadrant it should go in. So from one central place, I can actually create a task from an email, and not only that, put in the appropriate context, appropriate quadrants, and then assign it to a team member directly from here. And then of course, I always set due dates, and then click capture email. And so when you do that, what happens is on the right-hand side, the item details pops up. So now this is the same item details as you saw in the web app. And what it allows me to do is I can, again, set reminders. I can have conversation around it. And there's one big difference, which is this task, instead of just a blank task, a task that I created from scratch, in the resources section, that email file is right there. Okay, so with the email file, my coworker can actually open the email file and take a look at it and download it and respond to the customer as needed. What's really neat about Protomatrix that's unique is the ability to also attach emails to existing tasks. Now, this happens all the time, which is a customer might follow up, or you have an email that is actually relevant to an existing task. Well, with Protomatrix, you don't always have to create a new task. Instead, you open Protomatrix, and then you can go and prioritize this email by attaching an existing task. What happens, this search panel will open up, and you see how there's an email here. I can actually attach the email to an existing task. And that allows me to attach multiple emails to one task. And I might have a bunch of other resources too. Again, if you're working with an external customer, or you need to do a report for your executive, right? And the executive sends you a follow-up email and you want everyone to be in the same page, you can attach all your emails, your presentation, and links to your SharePoint, et cetera, into the resources section for every single task in Protomatrix. Now, there is that recorded webinar on email management. So if you're really interested in learning more, make sure you check that out. Okay, so that's how email management works inside Protomatrix. Let me give you some tips how I use it. I always prioritize my important emails by sending them to Protomatrix. Now, I do it a couple different ways because I'm not always on the computer here where I can go and just convert into a task. When on my phone, I can actually send my emails into the Protomatrix inbox. So the way you get the Protomatrix inbox is the following. When you go back to Protomatrix, you can click on this inbox icon here, And then you have what's called your secret inbox address. When you click on that, you'll get an email address. Save that email address as inbox part of matrix as a contact. And then what happens is when you have an email and you're on the phone or something like that, and you say, hey, I actually need to prioritize this email, you can just forward that email into inbox party matrix. And then what that does is it actually creates a task. And then not only that, I can actually set due dates directly from that email forwarding. So it's a very, very useful thing to do. And sometimes I get an email, there's no way I can respond to it right now. But if I just flag it or if I mark it as unread, I'm not going to get reminders for it because I'm going to get a bunch of other emails as well. So I always do that with my emails, and I highly recommend you do that too. So I think it's so powerful. Okay, so that's how email management works in Party Matrix. Again, there's so much more to it, but you can check it out at your convenience. And then I'm going to switch gear to go over to Microsoft Teams. So if you use Microsoft Teams, again, it's not required to use Microsoft Teams to use Party Matrix, but if you do use Microsoft Teams within your organization, definitely install Party Matrix because it actually helps a lot with context switching. So if you go to the App Store and search for Party Matrix, you can install the app. And if you install the app, it'll show up here on the left side, right click on it to choose Pin It. And when I open Party Matrix here inside Teams, it looks exactly like my Party Matrix web app, right? There's just some minor differences. The menu is at the top here instead of on the left-hand side. So I won't go to the details here in terms of using the application, but I want to highlight a couple of things. So when you have Party Matrix here, there's up at the very top, you'll see several things. First, there's this little email icon. So when you invite team members to projects or others invite you to projects to collaborate together, it'll show up here as an invitation. The second is the home view. So if I click on this home icon here, it brings me to the home view of Party Matrix, which is where you should start your day. So for me, for example, I have these alerts, right? So on a daily basis, I get a bunch of alerts. In fact, I get maybe a few hundred alerts that entails the updates across all the critical projects and tasks that I have, as well as reminders and due dates. And so the alert section lets me know that, this task is a task that I forward into Party Matrix. I have a due date or it requires my attention. And then I can click through each of these and ensure that, anything that's important, I actually have looked at. And then whenever I'm done, I can also click on clear all notification or clear all old items, etc. When you create those reminders, let's say you have those daily or weekly reminders on a daily basis, it'll pop back up here in the alert section. And that's the way to trick your brain to make sure that you work on the right things, right? So when I have an important task, when I have those daily reminders, it keeps on popping up into my alerts. And so I know that I'm not going to forget about it. Now, of course, there's a couple of other views. Here you can see the agenda, which helps you see the things you have to do today. And then you have these other views to define your items across all your projects. Additionally, at the very top here, there's search views that allows you to actually search across your entire Party Matrix and be able to see everything that you've done. So if I click on search, what it does is actually shows me all the tasks I have across, well, it actually shows me all tasks across all the Party Matrix that I have access to. And if I click on filters, I can actually go and find all the things that are overdue, find all the things that are starred, find the things that are delegated to me, and then I can filter by quadrants. I can actually filter by tags and so forth. And so this is a view where you can go and see what are the things you accomplished last quarter, or what are the things your coworker accomplished last quarter, right? Is if you work with other people. Now, there's a couple of unique features inside Teams I want to highlight. If you click on this chat section here, inside a Teams conversation with a coworker, one thing you can do is go to the Party Matrix one-on-one view. What's really neat about this one-on-one view is it actually switches the context. Instead of looking at everything from the project perspective, you look at it from the people perspective. So when I go to the one-on-one here, I can see everything I have in common with my coworker. So here, for example, I have Eugenia selected, and I go to the one-on-one view. I see all the things I have with her, either tasks delegated to her that I'm following, or tasks delegated to me that I'm following. So imagine if this is your direct report, you can go to the one-on-one view and see all the things that you've assigned that person and the status of them. And in fact, it's so easy to see the tasks that are overdue, right? For example, you say, hey, this is overdue. Why didn't we get to it, and so forth. And so when you have that one-on-one meeting with your coworker, it is so easy to hone in and talk about the things that are important. And so I really, really like the one-on-one view. I think it's a really unique capability inside Matrix, and you should leverage it, especially if you delegate a lot or if you have team members across so many different projects, and you need to see everything you have in one central place. This aggregates all of that. To get to the one-on-one view, you simply click on this plus icon, choose Matrix, and then choose one-on-one, and then select the person. And so you can do this one-on-one view for every single person that you chat with. And now from this single place, you can actually add shared tasks. So what a shared task is, it's essentially a task that delegates to the other person and adds you as a follower. So then when you, again, have that one-on-one meeting and you're talking about, hey, we should do this, we should do that, and so forth, you can literally use this view, create all your shared tasks, set due dates automatically without having to switch your matrix. And that's what our goal is, to reduce context switching. So if you do use Matrix often and you do delegate often, I recommend checking that out. Now, there's a couple of other things you can do inside Teams. For example, you can turn any conversation into a task. If you click on this ellipsis here, you can choose Create PM Item. And what that does is convert any message into a task and link back to it. And so that's really neat because, Matrix gives you the context of time, right? So if you and your coworker are chatting about something, you convert that into a task. Matrix lets you go back to Microsoft Teams to that moment in time when you had that conversation. And then not only that, you can see how you can actually share Matrix tasks as action cards. And again, you simply go to Matrix here, and then attach the action cards. And then, of course, you have the Matrix chatbot, which gives you notifications of the, when tasks are due and so forth. So Matrix for Teams has so much more integrations. We have integrations with meetings for you to generate meetings agenda using Matrix. We also have other integrations too. If you go to the App Store, you click on Copilot. Matrix is one of the very, very few applications that works with Copilot already. So again, if your organization supports this, Matrix is there from the very beginning. We also have workflow automation that allows you to set rules inside Teams. So that's how our integration with Teams works. And you've seen now our integration with Outlook, with Teams. I just want to highlight a couple of other things real quick, and then we'll go back to the presentation. So here, let me see here if I have, if you go to connectors of Matrix, we have integrations with Jira, Outlook, To-Do, Planner, Azure DevOps, and so forth. So if you have a couple of other software systems that you use, Matrix can pull those in as read-only tasks as different projects in Matrix. And then Matrix also has Chrome and Edge extensions. So if you use Microsoft Chrome or use Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge, install our extensions. What that allows you to do is you can convert any web page into a task. This is very useful if you use SharePoint or something like that, and you want to attach a SharePoint file to an existing Matrix item. I also mentioned how there are hundreds of templates. If you go to affluence.com, there's an option to click on templates. And when you go to templates, this is the list of templates that we have. And then, of course, if you go to affluence.com/productivity/templates, you can also see a lot of other templates that we have that you can leverage. And we also have a really detailed explanation on how to use the template for every single purpose, right? Everything from building brands, everything to helping clients or construction projects, etc. Okay. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump back to the presentation. So now it's up to you. It's on you to sign up for Matrix if you haven't already. And then, of course, if you use Teams and Outlook, make sure you install our application. I recommend that you create at least 3 projects. They're personal priorities, a shared team priorities, and then a key initiative. When I say key initiative, what I mean by that is, it's something that matters, right? Because your whole goal of Matrix is to make sure that you focus on critical tasks. And so if that's the case, if there's something that's really important for you this quarter or this month, make sure you track that in Matrix. Invite the appropriate team members and pitch to them on why it's important to focus on high impact tasks. In fact, the easiest way to do this is, create your matrix, create your priorities, and share it with your manager. And then you have a really good conversation with him or her on whether or not this is on the right track, right? You don't want to waste time working on things that don't matter. And then vice versa, if you delegate a bunch of tasks to others, make sure they know what's important, what's urgent. One thing that I think is the worst possible way to use our time and resources is to work on something so hard, do such a good job, and it doesn't matter because it's not important. So that is a waste of resources at every single level. And so the whole point of Party Matrix is if you can identify some of those discrepancy early on and make sure that no one works on the wrong things, I think you'll find value in Party Matrix right away, and it'll justify every cost that comes with Party Matrix. And then make sure that you create items with due dates in the appropriate quadrants, right? That's all there is to it. If you set due dates and you put in the appropriate quadrant, then you know the dimensions of importance and the dimensions of urgency. And then make sure you don't drop them, because, you know, if you do get those tasks done, go back to Party Matrix and mark them as done. When you do, Party Matrix will track how long it took you to finish those tasks, and you can actually run reports around those things as well. So if you use Party Matrix to manage tickets for support or something like that, and your team members actually mark them done at the right time, you can actually get a history of how well you're doing. And then finally, ruthlessly prioritize. And what I mean by that is, you know, if you have everything as important and urgent, as in you have every single task in the quadrant 1, then nothing is, right? It's the same thing as a list. Might as well use a list in that case. So I recommend never put in more than 25% of your task in quadrant 1, never more than 25% of the task in quadrant 2. In fact, one thing that, you know, was so interesting, I learned from a customer, is that if you have things in quadrant 1, it means you're firefighting. And so using Party Matrix well means eventually you have almost nothing in quadrant 1, and the vast majority of things are in quadrant 2. The important things are in quadrant 2. So ruthlessly prioritize your time, because if you don't, someone else will. And then in terms of advice, a couple of advice, of course, use Party Matrix to track high impact tasks. My goal today in this webinar is when you walk away from this presentation, you're excited about using Party Matrix to start tracking the tasks that you have, and you're excited about showing that to your manager, so they're on the same page as you. That's the goal, right? And so if you track high impact tasks, it's very easy to share that information. And then never forget that it's a communication tool to keep you guys aligned. When you have that in-person meeting in the office, in the room, and you project Party Matrix, everyone will be on the same page so quickly. And trust me, you know, there's nothing that compares to being aligned in a meeting. And then finally, use Party Matrix to manage individual goals. That was the start of Party Matrix. In fact, you know, we started out as a software solution more than, you know, 12 years ago or something like that, as a way to help individuals manage their goals. And then over time, it evolved into a solution for entire organizations to manage their projects and priorities. But we never forget the root of individual goals. So I hope that you use Party Matrix as an individual. Make sure that you track the things that matters to you. And so what success with Party Matrix should look like: you have one central place to track priorities. Everyone on the team understands and are aligned on key tasks. Repetitive procedures are templatized to save you in future work. And then important emails are prioritized and triaged to the proper team members and never forgotten. And with that, I conclude my presentation. If there's any questions right now, I'll take a look in the chat and see if I can address them. Okay, how do you make an email a task on the Party Matrix? So let me show you that one more time here in case you missed it. So if I go back to here, you see how when I created that email as a task, and I convert that into a task and I choose to prioritize it, what happens is that the content of the email actually gets copied here into the notes section, but then the email itself is copied into the resources section. And then one other thing, you see how actually, because I created a task earlier, when I go back here, our system automatically tells me that this could be a duplicate item. So this is pretty useful if you have coworkers that are CC'd on an email, and then you guys go and try to prioritize Party Matrix. If your coworker captured already, Party Matrix will try to help you identify so that you don't create a duplicate task. Will it automatically add the email attachment or URLs to the task? The answer is yes. In fact, you can customize that option right here. So let me show you how that works. So if you go to Party Matrix again, and then you click on here, you open Party Matrix, and then you click on this gear icon here, you go to settings. What happens is you have several options. First, you can always attach the message as in the item notes. You can attach the original email to Party Matrix task, and then you can attach the link to the email here. So to answer your question, what happens is this is defaulted on. So whenever you create a task from an email, it'll automatically add the email and then all the attachments from the emails directly from there. So the other thing you can do, if you look at the email management masterclass webinar, is that you can actually forward email into specific projects as well and specific quadrants. And then you can also, essentially, if you use Gmail, you can use the Gmail extension as well, or also you can forward it into your inbox and so forth. So there's a lot of different ways to turn emails into tasks inside Matrix. Great, thank you. Are there any other questions? All right. If not, oh, all right, go ahead and ask your question and I'll be happy to take a look. So in the meantime, I do want to show you how to convert, while I wait for the questions in the chat here, how to convert a project into a template. If you go and select your project, let's say you created those tasks before, and you open the item details here, you can click on this, and then you can choose Save Project as Template. That's as simple as that. When inviting coworkers, is there a way to know if they're also using PM? No, there's no way for you to know. If you need to, you can always just ask your coworker if they use Matrix already. Otherwise, it'll send them an invitation into your account to use Matrix. Okay, the other question is, how do you reorder within a quadrant? That's a great question. So we actually have a lot of different filter option here. You see how I can sort items. I can choose a lot of different ways, but if I do manual sorting, I can actually, you see how I can actually drag and move items around. Actually, when you have starred items and so forth, I guess it does become a little bit tricky because stars item always go to the top, but this is how you can actually reprioritize a task within a quadrant, except for starred items, which are always at the top. So the answer is yes, you can reprioritize the tasks themselves. One thing I've seen users do is here in the icon, instead of using just the email icon, you can use numbers, and then afterwards you can make it very easy to see priorities level within the task. So we recommend using essentially 0 to 9 or 1 to 9 in particular. And I also recommend using 1, 3, and 9. So instead of worrying about 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth, use 1, 3, and 9, 1 low priority, 9 very high priority. That's just a convention that I've seen many times to be very successful. So make sure that you decide whether or not something is really important or something is not important, right? So you don't have to go and worry about the granular aspect of it. These are very good questions. When utilizing Matrix, it is within Outlook and Teams. However, I feel like maybe, yeah, your question is missing something there. So while you're typing the rest of your question, no, so Matrix, oh, okay, I see what you mean. So Matrix does not need to be open within a browser. So if you use Matrix inside Outlook and Teams, you never even have to open a web app. In fact, though, we actually have a desktop app. So I'm going to pull that down for you here. So Matrix also has native Mac app as well as native Windows app. So if you go to affluence.com/downloads, you can access our native apps. And so if you want Matrix as an actual application, I have that here as an actual application. The one nice thing about the actual application is that when you go to the resource section of an email that you prioritize, and if there's an email file, it lets you open the email file directly inside Outlook. So that is the one problem with the web app and the Teams app is from a permission standpoint, it does not allow you to open an email file directly. But from a inside the Teams app and inside the Matrix native desktop app, you're able to open email files. So I like having the application here, so then I can jump to it directly and I can pin it on my Mac desktop, and it allows me to open Matrix really easily. There's someone that said you couldn't hear me. I have a feeling that was unique to you. So what happens is maybe after this webinar is over, I'll send out the recording and hopefully you'll be able to hear me then. Fantastic. Are there any other questions? If not, you can always reach out to me, hi@affluence.com, if you have additional questions. Otherwise, support@affluence.com if you have technical questions or something like that. I'm very um, I'm always eager to hear feedback from customers on how you use Matrix. We are also building a lot of user guides on how to use Matrix. So we're always interested to hear from you on what are the ways in which you're leveraging the system, and how we can improve. So please keep us in the loop. I hope this was helpful. Thank you all for being here today. And again, I'll get the recording to you not too long from now. And then the other thing is definitely check out the other webinars on email management and templates. And if you have interest in any other webinars, keep an eye on it, and we also will be producing other webinars too. Thank you all.